So we mentioned the Lions, the 49ers, the Chiefs, very clearly contenders. I think we can say it's easy to say that they're all contenders. Not every team is as easy to label as a contender or not. So we'll play a little bit of a game of contender or pretender, starting with, I think, the most divisive team in the league, a team that you could say is a contender because of their roster and is a team that could be considered a pretender because of their roster, and that is the Dallas Cowboys. Nate, are the Cowboys a contender or pretender this year?
This is impossible because Charles McDonald and I, we have Football 301, our podcast. Find it on Yahoo. And we also, we've gone from, this team is easily a pretender. And that's why I'm going to stick with it. That's my answer, that the Cowboys are a pretender. But we've come around a little bit. We're coming around. I don't want to steal Charles' thunder because I know he's going to throw down this alley-oop a little bit. But but I think when I look at this team, what concerns me is what's concerned me in the past is the spine of their defense, stopping the run. It's old school football adages. It's running the ball and stopping the run. I trust Dak more than most people will. I think he's a fantastic quarterback and he can win in the playoffs. They have CeeDee Lamb. They have an ace. Secondary pass catchers aren't great. Jake Ferguson's a good player, though, and I just get scared, though. I look at the running backs, and it's like, yeah, I recognize Ezekiel Elliott, but, and then the offensive line's got a couple rookies, and then also on the defense, just the spine. What is Maisie Smith, other than he has an allergy? And then what are their linebackers? And, so it's just those classic things that's kept me from going I really like this team, even if I've come around on them a little bit.
It's pretender, for me, where you have to look at the offseason, right? And it's just, the vibes have been bad, right? Jerry.
Vibes are not good.
They're not good. Yeah, they're not good. And Jerry is walking around with a T-shirt that says "bad vibes" on it right now because he's come out and said CeeDee Lamb not really a priority. Dak's not paid. Micah Parsons not paid, and that's what everyone was hoping would get done this offseason. But those three guys are still on the roster. Dak's still here, and I'm with you. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. CeeDee Lamb, he's going to get a deal that pays him north of $30 million a year for a reason.
Deservedly.
Right. Micah Parsons, probably the best defensive player in football. And if you've hit on your two rookie offensive lineman picks, then this should be a really good team. The only problem is the depth that they didn't really address this offseason because they didn't make any free agent signings. So you're kind of relying on a bunch of rookies to come in and set the tone, but the core of this team is still really good.
God, you talking about Jerry Jones as the bad vibes minister made me think of the Breaking Bad. He's Walter White. I am the vibes who knock. I am the one bringing the bad vibes to this party of my own accord for this franchise I claim to love. But no, I'm kind of with you guys here. I have a podcast, Gojo and Golick. My dad is very low on the Dallas Cowboys. He thinks they're taking a step back this year. To me, contender or pretender is a postseason award. I think the Cowboys are still going to be really good in the regular season. I cannot trust them in the postseason for all the reasons you guys mentioned. Tony Pollard coming off career lows last year. You've got two bona fide studs. Zach Martin and Tyler Smith are both great there. I think the guys that they brought in, especially Tyler Guyton at left tackle, have a bright future there. They're as good at identifying early round talent and developing them as any program in football. But you mentioned it. You replaced Tony Pollard going out with a career low 4 yards per carry there to Zeke Elliott who had 3.5 yards per carry last year in New England and is on the wrong side of the age for running backs. And so all those things together for what we've seen. Hey, postseason football, for all the new world stuff we want to do, especially in the NFC now in the last number of seasons. This is a place where you got to run and stop the run in the postseason, and that hasn't gone away.
Just think of the teams they play. 49ers, Rams, Packers, all teams that are going to pound the rock in the playoffs, so you got to stop it.
Contender, ? Pretender, ? I'm Ron Burgundy, ? That is the Dallas Cowboys. But we'll stick in the division. A team that a couple of years ago, if you even questioned if they were a contender or not, it would have been ridiculous. But now, the Philadelphia Eagles, it's a fair question mark to ask if they are a contender or a pretender.
Yeah, I went with pretender here. They're a team that I stare at the stars, and it's kind of like this Cowboys a little bit, where it's stars and scrubs. With the Eagles, I keep coming back to the term, they're my Enron team, where they're a little too big to fail, too good to fail, but I don't think they're a little hollow on the inside. They have, and I could talk about their defense and some of the issues there, but really it keeps coming back to me is Kellen Moore, their new center Cam Jurgens, and Jalen Hurts, and their relationship. That battery mateship of those three is going to be huge and decide their whole season, because what has been their kryptonite is blitzes, aggressive defenses that change the picture. Film is your resume. Once you put that on film, especially a playoff game that everyone's going to study, well, every defense they play is going to do the exact same thing. So those guys, the offense coordinator, Jeff Stoutland, their offensive line coach too, but Cam Jurgens and Jalen Hurts, That kind of has me a little worried that I think other teams can pick at that, plus some of the kind of defensive holes that I think that they have. Kind of is more of a good team, but incomplete still.
I'm going to go with Pretender as well. And I think when you look at the roster, yeah, it's a lot of good players, but when you start looking at the split between offense and defense, it's almost all offensive guys. You have Jalen Carter, who for the first 10 weeks of last year's season was playing as good as any defensive tackle in football. Hit a bit of a rookie wall, but I think you can count on him being a star. Outside of him, you've got Bryce Huff, who couldn't even be a full-time player with the Jets last year, and we'll see how that role shifts with him and being with the Eagles now. You have two rookie defensive backs with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. DeJean, who hasn't even really practiced all that much because he's been injured. I really think that you could be looking at a disaster scenario on that side of the ball if the pieces don't mesh together and you kind of just get hit with the bug of youth, right, where you have all these young guys at the same time. But it's still the Eagles, right? They still have all this top-end talent. I just don't think they have the defensive depth to really get where they want to go this year.
I'll say this. I went Contender still on this because you mentioned all that talent. You know what the bug of youth can't be worse than? The bug of injury that they got hit with in the back half of last season.
Yeah.
Like, they at the very least, we talked about the Cowboys failing to go out and meaningfully address their deficiencies in any way. Philly at least tried with all the guys they brought in. Like, they tried bringing in Devin White. They did swap out with Bryce Huff there. They drafted young guys in the secondary to give him a little bit of depth so that, hey, if you got to throw Quinyon Mitchell in while Cooper DeJean gets going, Keely Ringo's still on the outside. Like, they tried, and there's more there than there was last year for a team that was still competitive, even though they were winning in ways that we didn't feel were sustainable. And now going into this year, yeah, it'll be interesting, but I still think offensively, the offensive line around Cam Jurgens, who was personally scouted by Jason Kelsey, also has a good group to bring him along, a coordinator that's probably going to give him a few more answers than they had last year, and Saquon Barkley running behind the best offensive line he's ever had that I'm interested to see.
Yeah,
I feel like that's an underrated addition this offseason. We're not talking enough about Saquon Barkley and his addition to that offense, but let's stick in the NFC. Nate, your team, dare I call it your team?
Yes, I know.
The Green Bay Packers.
Your dad might throw up here.
Talk about breaking remotes, no son of mine.
No, but yes, the Green Bay Packers, full-on contender for me. I don't want to spoil anything for a later answer, but why I'm high on the Packers, I kind of hinted this earlier. It's this offense that I'm super, 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 super high on. Because even if the offensive line, I'll start there because that can usually be the weakness, the thorn on the side of a contender. It might not be star-laden, and they're losing David Bakhtiari, who has played 400 snaps in 5 years. But they have it's kind of more the whole of the team. It's the whole of the unit, and they're well coached, and they play in a scheme that makes them, the greater of some of the parts. But also Jordan Love, who I really legitimately think could, contend for an MVP this year if all things go right. He does the big boy stuff. He does the throws over the middle, attacking downfield, trick shots, all the good stuff you want to see. That matters in the playoffs when you have to do that. And teams are going to make you do that. All right, he showed it a little bit to me, even if it didn't end great against the 49ers in the playoffs. But I just think that offense I keep coming back to, and then they just got, defensive additions, defensive, personnel that makes more sense because it can't be worse than it was the prior years with the defensive coordinator. All comes together, and I just think it's a nice, cheesy package that can be a contender this year.
There you go, cheesy indeed.
Yeah, very cheesy.
The defense is what has me excited. I think they're contenders for sure. The NFC North in general, this is going to be a tough division, but the Packers, the collection of talent they have on defense now, I think will help them kind of get past, whatever problems they had last year when they almost knocked off San Francisco in the division round on the road. You've got Xavier McKinney, and I think if you had just had him out there on the field trying to tackle Christian McCaffrey instead of Jonathan Owens, that game might have looked different at the end of it. But now they've made these upgrades. You're hoping that guys like Devontae Wyatt can hopefully come out and improve upon what he showed in the past couple seasons. And like you said, Jordan Love, the offense, they've got so much talent here. I don't know if it's sometimes it feels like a little bit too early to just anoint them because, like you said, we're kind of working off just one back half of the season where they went supernova. But it feels like they can do that again.
It feels real.
does feel
That's
real.
it. And even if not everyone goes to the moon, I think it's just all those baby steps they all take. When you have a bunch of babies, like that can add up to something bigger.
And you talk about like positionless football. That one's almost starless football. The receiving core is this group where anyone could do it on any given day. The offensive line is a bunch of extremely versatile pieces. Like Elton Jenkins as the face for an offensive line that's got so many guys that can play in different spots. Jordan Morgan playing in at guard right now, who I thought was going to be one of the better tackles coming out at the end of the first round of this draft. But I'm with you. The defense, Jeff Hafley coming over. You want to talk about an identity shift in terms of what you allow the athletes that you've been bringing in to go and do. He is a solve your problem with aggression kind of coordinator where it's simplify, we're going to the 4-3 stuff, trace your roots back to the Legion of Boom Seahawks, and let these guys get upfield and raise hell. Let all the Georgia Bulldogs that you brought into this, Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt, pin their ears back, get up in gaps, and do what they were put on this earth to do, and go make life miserable for the offensive line and people in the backfield.
They do all the things, I think, especially on offense and now defense, where it's going to be, they have an identity. And that's like what a lot of teams you need to be a contender. And it's just, that's what's cool about the offense is that they can shift to what defenses are going to present. And now they just have stuff on defense where it's like they have answers finally. It's like they don't feel hopeless on that end.
Well, let's take a look into the AFC, a team that got a little bit in the offseason, but also lost a lot, and that is the Baltimore Ravens. Nate, are the Ravens a contender?
This has shocked even me when I put this down, but I put them down as a pretender.
Ooh.
And
Spicy.
It's not saying they're not missing the playoffs or anything. I think they're making the playoffs. I just think they're going to have regression on both sides of the ball. I think first and foremost, you have offensive line stuff that they've dropped out there. They've lost some guys. They're kind of reshifting it with the younger players. Lamar Jackson had a great year last year, but it's just hard to do it again with another MVP. He's already has, actually, so that's terrible to say that. But do it again. Yeah, sorry. So maybe that's not a great point. But I like the addition with Derrick Henry, but it's just, I have some receiver question marks. Yes, I like Zay Flowers, but to me, he's like a number 2. Can we get anything out of Rashad Bateman? If we can, I have some great Dynasty fantasy shares that are going to hit finally, but it's going to take some time. But just some of the defensive brain drain that's happened. Like they've lost a lot of their assistant coaches. They lost their defensive coordinators now in Seattle. Zach Orr gets promoted. I've heard good things about Zach Orr. I know him as a player. You just never know. When you get a new play caller, you just never know what's going to happen that first year, especially if they got some guys missing now. So it's just more that I think they take a step back to just a playoff team as opposed to a team that we think can be a Super Bowl favorite.
I think those are all valid points. but I'm just a believer in this organization as like a machine, you know?
Yeah.
And when I look at the defense, I think there's definitely got to be some concern with just a new defensive coordinator, Zach Orr, replacing Mike McDonald, who did such a tremendous job last season. But they still got the same players for the most part, which is where I keep coming back to. And now you've added Nate Wiggins, who had maybe the greatest preseason debut that any defensive player has ever had with 3 pass breakups in the first drive. Shame on you, Kenny Pickett. Come on. What was that? But at the same time, you go back, I think this could be the best secondary in football. They still have guys like Justin Madubuike up front. Still hoping you can get something from guys like Odafe Owe and some of the other young edge rushers that they've drafted. And then on the flip side, I'm with you on the offensive line concerns because we got killed by Ravens fans for saying that. But Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, if there were 2 guys that could survive something like that, I would say.
Did you hear me spiral on my point?
Right.
I was like
Lamar
picturing him in the
Jackson, Derrick
backfield. I'm like,
Henry.
that is
Derrick
pretty nice.
Henry wearing the Ravens all-black uniform in the backfield. That can't lose.
It's just defense plus Lamar, Derrick Henry. I'm still in, even though I think the offense is going to take a bit of a step back.
Yeah, I think defensively, I remember Ted Wynn wrote about them, and Mike McDonald's secret sauce was what a great teacher he was, simplifying concepts, making it easily digestible. And so having the guys a part of your core that still have that internalized and can go through as it stays consistent, I think helps that side. But to the offensive line point, listen, losing as many guys off that group as you did for a group that already last year rotated tackles a bunch, there was some added development of the depth in that way. I do think it is offset by just first and foremost, you want to talk about in the rushing attack with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, where of ball carriers with at least 100 carries last season, Derrick Henry second behind only Christian McCaffrey in terms of yard after contact contact per rush. Lamar Jackson, almost a fifth of his runs last year went for 10 or more yards. So you've got true thunder and lightning in the backfield on any given play, holding the backside of a defense, making defenders at the second level have to worry. All that stuff as a former offensive lineman helps offset the job in front of you, especially as you're trying to get some of these young guys up to speed early on. And like we talked about with the Chiefs, this is an offense now with a healthy Mark Andrews back and Isaiah Likely gets a lot of their flexibility formation-wise back, can do a lot of that same stuff under Todd Monken that can help these guys out in the early going, but still give them shots downfield with Zay Flowers and all the parts we saw develop last year.
And look, if anybody can withstand a little bit of pressure up front, it's Derrick Henry. But I'm intrigued to see how he fits in this new role, because what he did in Tennessee is going to be much different than what he's asked to do in Baltimore. It's two very different offenses. And one thing about Derrick Henry is he gets better the more touches he gets. He gets better later in the season. It's like he has a ramping up period. If he doesn't have those touches in Baltimore that he had in Tennessee, like, are we really going to get peak Derrick Henry? So something to look at there. But with the Houston Texans, I think this is one of the most intriguing and exciting teams this offseason. Are they legitimate Super Bowl contenders?
I think they are. I think they are contenders. I think they have this guy named C.J. Stroud. That's really, really good, and he looks really, really good in the preseason. So I was like, yeah, to the moon. But no, it's I would say first and foremost, the concerns I have with them, before I get into why I like them, is they have some defensive spine issues too. They have Azeez Al-Shaair now playing linebacker for him, but they gave up a lot of explosive plays last year against the same types of offensive attacks. But they counteracted it by adding a lot of juice on the defensive front and a lot of juice on offense. And I think because they have Stroud, they have Nico Collins, who I truly think I really think he can make a standing as a top 10 receiver after this year. Even though people think Stephon Diggs is going to take a little bit away, I think this is going to be more of Nico's show, and then that he's going to really ascend, that we're into kind of the public consensus. He got paid already, usually follow the money. But also, they have Tank Dell, if hopefully he can play a full season, but now he can kind of take a step back and roll, which I think will help out. But more than anything, they're going to run the ball because this is a Kyle Shanahan offense with Bobby Sloak as the coordinator. Joe Mixon is way better than Devin Singletary. That helps. If we get some O-line health with Joe Mixon, it's going to make everyone's lives easier, and it's going to make C.J. Stroud's lives easier, which is like pretty scary, I think, for everybody else.
Motor Singletary disrespect. Wow.
Slow-mo.
Motor Singletary. Catching strays on the program.
I think I would have the Texans as contenders too. I do think that this is an interesting case though, because they make me feel a little hypocritical where, like, I'll talk about the Cowboys being held together by just top-end talent.
Right.
And the rest of it, you're like, I don't know. But the Texans, to me, I still think they're contenders, where you have C.J. Stroud in this offense and how they were able to just take off last year. You know, they get to the wild card game against the Browns, one of the best defenses in the league all season, throttled them, killed them. But what makes me excited now is Will Anderson has a buddy this year.
Yes, he does.
Danielle Hunter, who comes over from the Vikings, that already might be the best edge duo in the league, right? Or at least has the potential to be the best edge duo in the league for this season. And I just think about, man, if you've got an offense that's going to be able to score like they do, and now we've got Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter pinning the ears back with Derek Stingley and Petrie on the back end. Like, that sounds like a lot of sacks and turnovers to me, even if you're not a great, like, down-and-down defense. So I think the variance that those guys will add can kind of push them over the top and get them.
Seeing, like, Jalen Petrie again during the preseason has been
Yeah.
a wonderful return to form for the people that loved him in Baylor in college. But I would say, too, just continuity. We've talked about the brain drain on other staff, coaching changes, the losses there. There is so much continuity to this team, but maybe nowhere more important than, especially that offensive coordinator. Getting Bobby Slowick back for this team, kind of similar to what we saw with Detroit last year, where everyone thought Ben Johnson was going to go in and get one of those jobs. And everyone this year thought Bobby Slowick would be that young, hot coordinator that people try and poach. And now you get another year of him and C.J. Stroud cooking together. And we all know the media loves C.J. Stroud because he talks as well as he plays about the game. And he's so giving of all that a guy with that aptitude walking into a year with an actual offseason that we always talk about being huge for these guys, I just think that development time for everyone to have time under task together gives this team such a leg up in all the ways we've talked about negatively with other teams.
Last and certainly not least, so do not come for me, Bills fans, the Buffalo Bills. Contenders or no?
I don't even remember what it said. All right, we're going to go with, actually, no, I remember. Because I have the first and foremost answer is Josh Allen, and that makes the Buffalo Bills always a contender. It's the same argument for me with Mahomes. If they have Mahomes and he's healthy, yeah, I'm going to think of this team as a contender. They have the dragon, and that's Josh Allen. When you have that, it's going to keep you in every game. It's going to keep you in every season to make the playoffs, make some noise. I also just don't think there's as big of a drop on offense that others maybe think. They lose Stephon Diggs, yeah. Stephon Diggs got weaned out of that offense in the second half of last year, for better or for worse, but they made a consensus effort to add a guy that fits them better now, which is Keon Coleman. The guy with size, the guy that can play inside and out. Maybe not going to be as speedy as Stephon, and of course he didn't time like that, but can add that zone-beating element that they have. So I think him and Dalton Kincaid have a really fun two-man game. And also the offensive line. This is a good run game. Not even just using Josh Allen. We always have to have that caveat, with quarterback runs. Even just excluding the most dangerous weapon in the game, which is Josh Allen's legs, this run game is top 5 last year. And I think they're going to be top 5 this year, and I think they'll be more consistent. So to me, that's why I go with them as always going to be a contender.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they're still contenders because they have Josh Allen. The offensive line is still pretty good. They should be able to run the ball. But I think on the defensive side, they've already suffered an injury with Matt Milano. They've got a lot of turnover on that side of the ball. But you still have guys up front that I think can be a source of continuity for them. Ed Oliver, Greg Rousseau, the defensive end for Miami for 3 years ago. Those guys, I think, can do just enough to kind of keep that Bills defense together in a way that can support an offense that, I'm with you, I think it's going to be one of the top 10 offenses in the league. You have one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and I don't really see a reason for you to be in a spot where you're saying, oh no, I'm down the Buffalo Bills, even though nothing's really changed except maybe what you think about Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think Nate's point's well served there. I think D-line depth, you want to ask, you're talking about reactions to preseason. Ask the fans of the Pittsburgh Steelers how they feel about the Buffalo Bills defensive line. They're going to have nightmares about what Greg Rousseau did to Broderick Jones on a few of those plays there. So not to bring up a former Georgia Bulldog dealing with a hard time there. But I just think between that and what you mentioned on the other side, a running back room where already James Cook was so incredible opposite him. And then Ray Davis is one of my favorite college running backs for the last few years now. And I think him as an off-speed pitch in that group, just committing to that portion of this while they flesh out whatever the passing game is going to look like around 11.5 personnel, whatever you want to call it, with Dalton Kincaid and company there. I just think the foundation, we've talked a lot about that with a lot of these teams, and the foundation around this team on both lines of scrimmage is strong.